Some wounds don't come from what happens to you. They come from being told you don't matter at all. Clara Mae spent 52 years being called a burden, worthless, something disposable by her own family. So when they sold her to settle a debt and left her at a stranger's ranch in the Wyoming wilderness, she expected nothing but cold rejection. But Colton Raye, a weathered cowboy carrying his own heavy scars, saw something different the moment she arrived at his door. In the quiet rhythms of ranch life, morning chores, evening fires, simple acts of kindness, two broken souls began to heal. What happens when two people the world gave up on refuse to give up on each other? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The truck's engine died with a shudder that seemed to echo across the empty landscape. Clara Mae sat in the passenger seat, hands folded in her lap, and stared at the ranch house that would apparently be her home now. The word home felt strange in her mouth, foreign as a language she'd never learned to speak. The driver, a man named Jack, who'd been paid to transport her like cargo, cleared his throat. "This is it," he said unnecessarily. His discomfort had been palpable for all 200 miles. The cab of his truck thick with unspoken questions he'd been too polite or too afraid to ask. She nodded. The house before them was weathered but sturdy, its logs silvered by decades of Wyoming wind and sun. It sat at the base of rolling hills that stretched toward mountains still capped with early autumn snow. Pine trees clustered close on three sides, as if sheltering the structure from the worst of the elements. A barn stood off to the left, red paint faded to rust in places. Fencing ran in neat lines toward distant pastures, where she could make out the shapes of cattle. Dark against the gold grass, it was beautiful in a spare, honest way that made her chest ache. Jack got out and retrieved her wheelchair from the truck bed. The worn leather suitcase came next. Everything she owned fit inside it, with room to spare. 52 years of living, and this was all she had to show for it. The suitcase had been her mother's once, before her mother decided Clara Mae wasn't worth the space she took up. The wheelchair unfolded with familiar creaks and groans. Jack positioned it by the passenger door, then helped her transfer from the seat. His hands were careful, professional. He'd probably transported others like her before. People being moved from one place to another. Arrangements made by family members who couldn't quite meet your eyes when they explained why you had to go. "You want me to take you up to the door?" Jack asked. "I can manage." Her voice came out steady. She'd had a lot of practice at sounding steady when everything inside her trembled. Jack hesitated, then nodded. He set the suitcase in her lap. "Good luck, ma'am," he said, and the pity in his voice made her jaw tighten. She didn't respond. The wheelchair's wheels crunched over gravel as she propelled herself toward the porch. Behind her, the truck's engine started. Jack was already leaving, his obligation fulfilled. The ramp leading up to the porch looked new, the wood unstained and pale against the older structure. Someone had built it recently. For her, she realized. Her brother must have sent word ahead. The thought of Marcus made her hands grip the wheels harder. He'd stood in the kitchen of the farmhouse where she'd spent her entire life and explained it all with the careful patience of someone talking to a child. The farm was failing. Debts were mounting. A man out in Wyoming needed someone to help keep his house, cook his meals. It was an arrangement, Marcus said. A solution that benefited everyone. He'd already accepted payment. He hadn't said sold. He'd never used that word. But Clara Mae knew what she was. Collateral traded to settle accounts her brother had run up gambling and drinking away the farm their parents had left them both. Left them, though Marcus always acted as if the inheritance had been his alone. And her continued presence was merely an inconvenience he'd tolerated out of Christian duty. The porch boards were solid under her wheels. She stopped before the door, suddenly uncertain. Should she knock, just go in? The rules of this new existence were unclear. Before she could decide, the door opened. The man who stood there was tall, with the kind of lean, weathered build that came from decades of physical labor. His face was lined deep around the eyes and mouth, skin tanned the color of old leather. grey threaded through hair that had once been dark brown. He wore jeans, a flannel shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, and an expression that shifted from surprise to confusion to something that might have been resignation. "You're early," he said. His voice was low, rough with disuse. The roads were clear. They stared at each other. Clara Mae had learned long ago to meet people's eyes steadily, to not flinch from whatever judgment or pity she saw there. This man, Colton Raye, Marcus had said his name was, looked at her differently than most. His gaze didn't slide away in discomfort or linger on the wheelchair with visible calculation. He simply looked at her, taking in her face, her posture, the suitcase in her lap. "Well," he said finally. "Come in then." He stepped back, holding the door. The house opened into a large main room that served as both kitchen and living area. Wood dominated, log walls, plank floors worn smooth, exposed beams overhead. A stone fireplace took up most of one wall, cold now in the early September afternoon. The furniture was sparse but well made. A sofa covered in faded denim, a scarred wooden table with 4 chairs, cabinets that had been built by hand decades ago. In the corner near the fireplace sat a rocking chair, its wood carved with intricate patterns of leaves and vines. It was beautiful work, clearly made with love and patience. But dust dulled its surface, and it sat at an angle that suggested it hadn't been moved in a very long time. Clara Mae rolled inside, acutely aware of Colton's presence behind her, the sound of the door closing. The house smelled of wood smoke, coffee, and a deep settled loneliness that she recognized immediately. "I should tell you," Colton said, and she heard him struggle with the words. "I didn't ask for this. Your brother, Marcus, he said his name was, he wrote me about 3 months back. Said you needed a place, that you were good with keeping house, that it would be—" He stopped. Started again. "I'm not real sure what he told you, but I want to be clear. I'm not expecting anything except maybe some company and someone who doesn't mind the quiet." She turned the wheelchair to face him. "He told me he sold me to settle a debt. That a man out in Wyoming had use for someone like me and was willing to pay for the trouble." Colton's expression hardened. He said, "What? You paid him money?" He explained it was an arrangement. Those were his words. She kept her voice even, factual. "I'm to keep your house and earn my keep. If I prove unsatisfactory, I imagine he'll expect you to return the goods." "Ma'am." Colton rubbed a hand over his face. "I don't know what kind of man your brother is, but I gave him $500 because he said you needed help getting out here and settling in. He said you were having a hard time after your parents passed and wanted a fresh start, somewhere nobody knew you. He never said anything about selling or arrangements or any of that." Clara Mae absorbed this. It didn't surprise her. Marcus had always been skilled at telling people what they wanted to hear. "So you thought you were helping?" "I thought I was giving a woman in need a place to land while she figured things out." His jaw worked. "I got a big house here and nobody in it but me. Seemed like I had the room." The kindness in that statement hurt worse than cruelty would have. She'd armored herself against cruelty. "Kindness found the gaps, I see," she said quietly. "Then you should know the truth. I haven't walked since I was 9 years old. Polio left me in this chair and that made me useless to my family. I've spent 43 years being told I'm a burden." Marcus wanted the farm to himself and needed money besides. Apparently, he found a way to solve both problems. Colton's face had gone carefully blank, but she saw the anger tightening the corners of his eyes. Not at her, she realized, at Marcus. "At the situation. Well," he said after a long moment, "guess we've both been played for fools." He crossed to the kitchen area, poured water into a kettle, set it on the stove. His movements were deliberate, giving them both time to think. "Here's what I figure. You came all this way. You got nowhere else to go, I'm guessing. And I'm rattling around in this house like a dried pea in a barrel. So maybe we make the best of it, just like that." He turned to look at her. "You got a better idea?" She didn't. The truth was, she had $63 to her name. No other family, no friends close enough to call on, and no way to get back to North Carolina even if she wanted to, which she absolutely did not. "I can cook," she said, "and clean. I can't manage heavy work, but I'm not completely helpless. I didn't figure you were. The kettle began to whistle. He poured water over tea bags in 2 mugs, brought one to the table, set it within her reach. You drink tea? Yes, thank you. He took his own mug to the window, stood looking out at the land. The silence stretched, but it wasn't entirely uncomfortable. Clara Mae sipped the tea, black, strong, unsweetened. It warmed her throat. I should tell you about the place, Colton said eventually. So you know what you're getting into. This is a working cattle ranch, about 800 acres. Not big by some standards, but it keeps me busy. I do most of the work myself, hire day help during branding and roundup. The house has 3 bedrooms upstairs and 1 down here, off the kitchen. I figured you'd want the one downstairs. That would be easier, yes. There's a bathroom down here too. Tub's old but deep. Should work all right for you. He'd thought about her needs, had made practical considerations. The realization settled something in her chest. The nearest town is Elkhorn, about 20 miles east, he continued. Not much there, grocery store, post office, clinic. They go in once a week, usually Saturdays. You're welcome to come along? Thank you. He finally turned from the window. I should show you your room, get you settled before dark. The bedroom was small but clean, with a window facing east and a bed covered in a faded quilt. Colton had already moved furniture aside to create space for her wheelchair to maneuver. A dresser stood against one wall, its drawers empty and waiting. The closet door hung open, 3 hangers inside. It's not much, Colton said. It's more than enough. And it was. It was a room of her own, a door she could close, a space nobody would tell her she didn't deserve. He brought in her suitcase, set it on the bed. I'll let you get unpacked. I've got evening chores to finish. There's bread and cold chicken in the refrigerator if you're hungry. Help yourself to anything. Mr. Raye, Colton. Just Colton. Colton. I want to be clear about something. I don't expect charity. I'll earn my place here however I can. I won't be dead weight. Something in his expression shifted. Ma'am, what's your name? Your brother never said. Clara Mae. Clara Mae Hutchins. Clara Mae. I'm going to tell you something and I hope you'll believe me. I've lived alone in this house for 3 years now. Before that, I lived here with my wife for 30. She died of cancer, slow and hard. This place hasn't felt like a home since. It's just been a structure I exist in. So if you being here brings even a little life back to these walls, that's worth more than any work you could do. Understood? Her throat tightened. She nodded, not trusting her voice. He left, closing the door gently behind him. Clara Mae sat in her wheelchair in the quiet room and felt something inside her crack open, not breaking but shifting, like ice beginning its slow thaw after a long winter. She unpacked methodically. 3 dresses, 2 skirts, 4 blouses, undergarments, a nightgown, a sweater, a hairbrush, a bar of soap, a toothbrush, a small leather-bound book of poetry her mother had given her before the illness that turned love into resentment. Everything found a place in the dresser drawers. The suitcase empty, she folded it and slid it under the bed. Then she transferred to the bed itself, testing it. The mattress was firm, the quilt soft with age. She lay back and stared at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of this new place. Wind in the pines, the distant lowing of cattle. Somewhere outside, Colton's boots crunching on gravel. For the first time in as long as she could remember, Clara Mae let herself imagine something other than mere survival. Maybe here in this remote place with this quiet man, she could find something she'd stopped believing existed. Maybe she could find home. When darkness gathered in the corners of the room, she heard Colton return to the house. The sound of water running, cabinet doors opening and closing, the clink of plates and silverware. She transferred back to the wheelchair and made her way to the main room. Colton stood at the stove, stirring something in a pot. He glanced up when he heard her wheels. I was going to call you for supper, he said. Nothing fancy. Just stew from yesterday, warmed up. Can I help? You can set the table if you want. Bowls are in that cabinet there. They moved around each other carefully, finding a rhythm. Clara Mae set out bowls, spoons, napkins. Colton sliced bread and poured water into glasses. They sat across from each other at the wooden table, steam rising from their bowls. The stew was good, beef and potatoes and carrots, seasoned simply but well. They ate in silence for a while. Clara Mae snuck glances at the man across from her. His hands were scarred and calloused, his movements economical. He ate like someone accustomed to solitary meals, focused on the task. "This is very good," she ventured. "My wife's recipe. I follow it best I can." She must have been a wonderful cook. She was wonderful at most things. He paused. "Her name was Sarah. Figured you should know. How long were you married?" 32 years. Would have been 35 this December. "I'm sorry for your loss." He nodded, took another bite. After a moment he asked, "You ever been married?" "No, nobody wanted—" She stopped, rephrased. "It never happened for me." Colton's eyes met hers, and she saw understanding there. He didn't pity her or make empty reassurances. He simply nodded, accepting the reality of her words. They finished eating. Clara Mae insisted on washing dishes. Colton didn't argue, just dried and put them away where she couldn't reach. When the kitchen was clean, he poured them each coffee, and they sat in the living area. He took the sofa. She positioned her wheelchair to face the cold fireplace. "Gets chilly at night this time of year," Colton said. "I'll light a fire tomorrow." That would be nice, more silence. It should have been awkward, but somehow it wasn't. Clara Mae thought about the carved rocking chair in the corner, about the love that had made it and the grief that had set it aside. "I should turn in," Colton said, finally rising. "Morning comes early on a ranch. You need anything, I'm just upstairs. First door on the right. Thank you. For everything. For not sending me back." He paused at the base of the stairs. "Where would I send you back to?" It wasn't really a question. They both knew the answer. Marcus's farm wasn't her home. Maybe it never had been. "Good night, Clara Mae." "Good night." She listened to his footsteps climb the stairs, heard the sound of a door closing. Then she sat alone in the quiet house, in this room that still held the ghost of the woman who'd lived and loved here. The darkness outside the windows was complete. No streetlights, no neighbors' houses, just the vast Wyoming night pressing close. Clara Mae thought about the day that had brought her here, about Marcus's calculated cruelty disguised as practicality, about Colton's unexpected decency, about the suitcase under her bed that held everything she'd been allowed to keep when she was discarded. She thought about what it meant to be deemed worthless by the people who should have valued you most. And she thought about Colton saying this house hadn't felt like a home in 3 years. About how maybe two people who'd lost everything could build something new from their broken pieces. It was too soon to hope, too soon to trust. But as Clara Mae made her way to her room and prepared for bed in this strange place that didn't feel entirely strange, she allowed herself the smallest possibility, maybe here, finally. She could be more than what her family had said she was. Maybe here. She could simply be enough. The photograph fell out when Clara Mae reached into the suitcase's side pocket for the small sewing kit she kept there. It drifted to the floor like a leaf, landing face up on the worn boards. She stared at it from the wheelchair, her hands frozen on the armrests. It had been 3 days since her arrival. 3 days of careful routine. Breakfast together at 7, Colton heading out to work the ranch, Clara Mae finding tasks she could manage from her chair. She'd reorganized the kitchen cabinets to more sensible arrangements, mended a torn curtain, swept floors. Small things, useful things. Ways to prove she wasn't the burden Marcus had always claimed, but the photograph stopped all of that. She hadn't known it was in the suitcase. Marcus must have thrown it in when he packed her things, perhaps without looking, perhaps not caring what memories he sent along with her cast-off body. Clara Mae transferred from the wheelchair to the floor, a maneuver that took effort and care. Her hands shook as she picked up the photograph. The edges were soft with age, the colors faded to muted tones. But the image remained clear enough. A family stood in front of the old farmhouse. Her father, young and strong, one hand on her mother's shoulder. Her mother, pretty in a floral dress, smiling at something beyond the camera's frame. Marcus, maybe 7 years old, gap-toothed and grinning. And a little girl in pigtails, standing straight and proud, holding a ribbon she'd won at the county fair for a painting she'd made. The little girl's legs worked. Her body stood without support. She looked at the camera with the confidence of a child who'd never been told she was worthless, who'd never learned to make herself small and quiet and grateful for scraps. Clara Mae remembered that day, remembered the weight of the ribbon in her hand, the way her father had lifted her onto his shoulders, the pride in her mother's eyes. She'd been 8 years old. The painting had been of their barn in autumn, gold leaves scattered across red paint. A year later, the fever came. She'd been sick for 2 weeks, burning hot, then shaking cold, her muscles cramping and seizing. The doctor had come twice. Her parents had prayed, and when the fever finally broke and she'd tried to stand, her legs wouldn't hold her. Polio, the doctor said. She'd been lucky. Many children died. Some were left in iron lungs, struggling for every breath. She'd only lost the use of her legs. Only her mother had cried. Her father had looked away. And Marcus had looked at her with something she'd been too young then to name. Relief, she understood now. Relief that he would always be the healthy one, the valuable one, the child worth keeping. The tears came without warning, hot and harsh. Clara Mae pressed the photograph to her chest and wept in a way she hadn't allowed herself in decades. For the child who'd lost everything in a matter of weeks. For the parents who'd slowly withdrawn their affection as the reality of permanent disability sank in. For the brother who'd learned to weaponize her condition, using it to diminish her at every turn. She wept for the life that had been stolen, not by the illness, but by the people who'd decided she wasn't worth loving anymore. The grief poured out in ragged sobs that shook her whole body. She didn't hear the knock on the door, didn't register the sound of it opening slightly. Clara Mae, Colton's voice stopped abruptly. Clara Mae looked up through her tears to see him standing in the doorway, his face stricken. He must have come in from evening chores, must have wanted to tell her something. Instead, he'd found her on the floor, falling apart. "I'm sorry," she gasped, trying to wipe her face, trying to compose herself. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" "Don't." He said it firmly, but not unkindly. He stepped into the room, moved the wheelchair closer, then retreated to the doorway. "Take your time. I'll be in the kitchen when you're ready." He closed the door. Clara Mae sat on the floor, the photograph still clutched in her hand. And something about his response, the care in moving the chair within reach, the respect in giving her privacy, the simple assumption that she would be ready when she chose to be, undid her even more completely. She cried until she had no tears left, until her chest ached and her throat burned. Then she transferred back to the wheelchair, washed her face in the small bathroom, and studied her reflection in the mirror. Red-eyed, blotchy-cheeked, hair disheveled, she looked every one of her 52 years, and then some. But she also looked, for the first time in a very long while, real. She found Colton in the kitchen, standing at the counter with his back to her, making coffee. He didn't turn when she entered, giving her time to settle, to find her words. "I found a photograph," she said finally. "Of my family before the sickness?" "Yes." He poured 2 cups of coffee, brought them to the table. They sat in their usual places. Outside the window, the last light was fading from the sky. "It was a good picture," Clara Mae continued. "Everyone was happy. I had legs that worked, and a ribbon from the fair, and parents who looked at me like I mattered. A year later, everything changed. Not just my body, everything." Colton wrapped his hands around his mug. "People showed their true colors. They showed what they valued. And it wasn't me. Not anymore." She took a breath. "My mother used to brush my hair every night." After the illness, she stopped. "My father used to call me his little artist. After he couldn't look at my drawings without this expression, like they reminded him of what I'd been and would never be again. And Marcus," she had to stop, had to swallow the bitterness. "Marcus learned he could get away with anything as long as he was the one who could walk. That's a hard thing to carry. I thought I'd made peace with it. I thought I'd accepted what I was. But seeing that photograph, seeing the person I could have been—" Her voice cracked. "I'm sorry you saw me like that. I tried to keep myself together." Colton was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. "Clara Mae, I'm going to say something, and I want you to hear me. You don't have to keep yourself together for my sake. You're not a guest here trying to be on your best behavior. If you need to cry, you cry. If you're angry, be angry. I'm not your brother, and I'm not going to use your feelings against you." She looked at him. This man she'd known only 3 days, and saw something in his weathered face that made her chest tight. Understanding, recognition, the knowledge of grief intimately carried. "I lost Sarah 3 years ago," he continued. "Watched cancer eat her away piece by piece. There were days after she died when I'd find myself on the floor of that bedroom upstairs, sobbing like a child. Still happens sometimes. Grief doesn't follow rules or timelines, and neither does the pain of being treated like you don't matter." "Thank you," Clara Mae whispered. "I want to offer you something," Colton said. "And I don't want you to feel pressured either way. You can stay here as long as you want. But if you decide this isn't working, if you want to go somewhere else, start over somewhere new, I'll help you. I'll give you money for travel, help you find a place, whatever you need. You're not trapped here. You're not sold goods that have to stay where they're put. You have choices." The words hit her like a physical force. Choices. When had anyone last given her a choice about her own life? "I don't have anywhere else to go," she said honestly. "That's not the same as choosing to stay." He was right. She could say yes because she had no alternatives, or she could say yes because she wanted to. The distinction mattered. Clara Mae thought about the last 3 days, about waking in a room with eastern light spilling across the floor, about Colton's quiet presence, never intrusive but somehow comforting, about the way she'd felt useful reorganizing the kitchen, mending that curtain. Small things, but hers. Chosen. She thought about the carved rocking chair in the corner, about this house that had forgotten how to be a home, about how maybe 2 broken people could learn to fit their jagged edges together into something whole. "I'd like to stay," she said. "Not because I have nowhere else to go, because I think maybe I could build something here. Something that's mine." Colton nodded slowly. "All right then, we'll figure it out as we go." They finished their coffee as night settled fully outside. When Clara Mae returned to her room, she placed the photograph on the dresser, propped against the wall. The little girl in pigtails looked out at her, still proud, still holding that ribbon. Maybe that child hadn't been lost entirely. Maybe she'd just been waiting for someone to see her again. The next morning, Clara Mae woke before dawn. She could hear Colton moving around in the kitchen, starting the coffee, preparing for his day. Usually she waited until he'd gone out to start her own routine. Today, she dressed quickly and made her way to the main room while he was still there. He looked up in surprise when her wheelchair emerged from the hallway. "You're up early. I thought I might make breakfast," she said. "If that's all right." Something shifted in his expression, surprise giving way to pleasure. That would be fine. She moved to the kitchen, taking stock of what was available. Eggs, bacon, bread for toast. Simple things, but she could work with simple. Colton poured her coffee, set it within reach, then went to feed the chickens while she cooked. It felt good to crack eggs into a bowl, to hear bacon sizzle in the pan, to toast bread to golden brown. By the time Colton returned, she had 2 plates ready, steam rising from the food. They ate together as sunrise painted the eastern window gold and pink. Neither spoke much, but the silence felt different now, warmer, more like companionship than simply the absence of sound. After breakfast, Colton paused at the door before heading out. "If you're looking for something to do today, there's a chest in the corner by the fireplace. Sarah used to keep quilts and things in there. Some of them need mending. If you're interested, I'll take a look." He nodded and left. Clara Mae cleaned the breakfast dishes, then made her way to the chest he'd mentioned. The wood was old, ornately carved with patterns of mountains and trees. She lifted the heavy lid. Inside were folded quilts, some whole, some damaged by time and moths. She lifted out the top one carefully. The fabric was beautiful, hand-stitched in patterns of stars and flowers. But a corner had come unraveled, and several patches had torn loose. Clara Mae ran her fingers over the work. Someone had put love into this, hours of careful stitching. It deserved to be preserved. She carried the quilt to the table, spread it out, assessed the damage. She could fix this. It would take time and patience, but she could restore what had been broken. It felt like a promise to herself. As morning light filled the room and the house settled into its familiar sounds, wind in the eaves, distant cattle, the creak of old wood, Clara Mae threaded a needle and began to mend. 2 weeks settled into rhythm with surprising ease. Clara Mae discovered that life on the ranch followed patterns as reliable as breath: morning chores before breakfast, the heat of midday when Colton took lunch in whatever field he was working, evening tasks as the light faded. She found her own patterns within his, creating a counterpoint melody to the daily song. The quilt became her companion. She worked on it each morning after Colton left, her fingers relearning skills her mother had taught her before the illness, before everything changed. The stitches came slowly at first, uncertain and uneven, but as the days passed, they grew stronger, more confident. She repaired the torn corner first, then moved to the patches that had come loose, matching thread colors as closely as she could from the sewing basket she'd found in Sarah's chest. Sometimes, working on the quilt, Clara Mae thought about the woman who'd made it. What had Sarah been like? Had she sat in this same spot, needle flashing in the light, dreaming of the family who would sleep beneath the warmth of her creation? The quilt felt like a conversation across time, one woman's hands continuing what another had begun. Colton noticed her progress. He didn't comment directly, but she'd catch him looking at the quilt spread across the table, something in his expression she couldn't quite read. Not sadness exactly, something gentler, recognition maybe. An acknowledgement that the house was coming back to life in small, careful increments. Their conversations remained brief, but grew less cautious. Over breakfast, they talked about practical things: the weather turning colder, a fence that needed repair, whether the cattle were ready for the winter pasture. Safe topics that required no vulnerability. But underneath the practical words, Clara Mae sensed something building. A tentative trust. A growing comfort with shared space. She learned his habits. He took his coffee black, 2 cups before heading out. He read the newspaper when he came in from town, his reading glasses perched low on his nose. He washed his hands carefully before meals, scrubbing away the dirt of the day's work. He was meticulous about closing gates, turning off lights, banking the fire each night before bed. He learned hers, too, though she didn't realize it at first. He started leaving her coffee cup on the table instead of the counter, easier for her to reach. He moved the bread box to a lower shelf without comment. When he brought groceries from town, he asked what she might like, actually waited for her answer. These small accommodations touched her more deeply than grand gestures would have. They spoke of attention, of someone who noticed her needs without making them feel like burdens. On Thursday of the second week, the phone rang during breakfast. They both looked at it, a rare occurrence. The ranch was remote enough that calls were infrequent, usually business-related. Colton rose, answered it with his customary brevity. Raye Ranch. A pause. His whole body tensed. Michael! Clara Mae felt the shift in the room immediately. She kept her eyes on her plate, giving him privacy, but she couldn't help hearing his side of the conversation. I know it's been a while. He stopped, listened. I understand you're busy. I just thought another pause longer. All right, yeah, you too. He hung up gently, stood with his hand on the receiver for a long moment before returning to the table. His breakfast sat untouched, cooling. Your son? Clara Mae asked quietly. Yeah. He picked up his fork, set it down again. Michael. He's in Denver. Works in finance, doing well for himself. That must make you proud. Colton's laugh was bitter. He doesn't want my pride. Hasn't for 3 years. She waited, sensing there was more if he wanted to share it. He blames me for Sarah's death, Colton said finally. She wanted to try experimental treatment in California. I said we didn't have the money, that the doctors here were good enough. By the time we realized they weren't, he shook his head. She died 2 months later. Michael said I let her die out of stubbornness. Maybe he's right. Did she want to go? To California? She said it was fine either way, that she trusted my judgment. His voice roughened. That's what she always said. And I failed her. Clara Mae set down her own fork. Colton, I don't know what the right choice was. But I know something about being blamed for circumstances beyond your control. Sometimes people need someone to be angry at, and the person closest is the easiest target. He looked at her then, really looked. You talking about yourself or me? Both, I suppose. They sat in silence, the eggs going cold on their plates. Finally, Colton pushed back from the table. I should get to work. Got fencing that won't fix itself. He left, but the shadow of the phone call lingered in the house like smoke. Clara Mae understood that kind of grief, the complicated tangle of loss and guilt and anger that had no simple resolution. She'd felt it herself when her parents died, when she'd grieved not just for their deaths, but for the love they'd withdrawn when she needed it most. That afternoon, she asked Colton to help her move to the porch. The weather was fine, warmer than expected for late September, and she wanted to work on the quilt in the better light. He carried one of the kitchen chairs out, positioned it beside her wheelchair so she could rest the quilt across both seats. This work all right? He asked. Perfect. Thank you. He started to leave, then paused. The quilt looks good. Sarah would be glad someone's fixing it. She did beautiful work. She did beautiful everything. He said it simply, a statement of fact rather than sentiment. Then he surprised her by sitting on the porch steps instead of heading back to work. You mind if I take a break here for a bit? Not at all. They stayed like that for a while, Clara Mae stitching while Colton sat on the steps, both of them facing the mountains that rose in the distance. The silence was comfortable now, companionable. She realized she'd stopped feeling like an intruder in this space, stopped measuring every action against the fear of being too much trouble. You ever been married? Colton asked. It was the second time he'd asked that question, but this time it felt less like polite conversation and more like genuine curiosity. No, I told you before, it never happened for me. That's not what I asked. I asked if you'd ever been married. You told me nobody wanted you. But I'm wondering if maybe you're the one who never wanted them. Clara Mae's hands stilled on the quilt. The observation was too close, too accurate. Why would you think that? Because I watch you. You're not someone who needs taking care of, despite what your family told you. You're capable and strong, and you've got your own mind. So maybe the men who came around weren't looking for a partner. Maybe they were looking for someone to manage or fix or feel good about themselves for helping. And maybe you were smart enough to say no. The words settled over her like the quilt itself, warm and unexpected, and covering places she'd thought would always be cold. She'd never considered it that way, never thought that her singleness might have been a choice rather than a rejection. There was one man, she said slowly. When I was 25, he seemed kind at first. Said he didn't mind the wheelchair. But after a few months, I realized he liked that I couldn't leave easily, that I would always need him. So I ended it. Good for you. My family said I was a fool. That beggars can't be choosers. Colton stood, brushed dust from his jeans. Your family didn't know what they had. Their loss. He headed down the steps, then looked back. For what it's worth, I'm glad you chose to stay here. Place feels different with you in it. He walked toward the barn, leaving Clara Mae with the quilt and the warm afternoon sun and a feeling she'd almost forgotten. The sense of being seen clearly and valued anyway. That evening, she finished repairing the torn corner and began the more delicate work of restoring the central star pattern. The thread was old, brittle in places, requiring patience and care. She worked by lamplight after dinner, while Colton read his newspaper, the two of them sharing space in an easy quiet that felt, for the first time, like something that might last. Before bed, she looked at the quilt spread across the table, still damaged, still incomplete, but undeniably better than when she'd found it. The work of repair was slow, but it was work that mattered. Each stitch was a small act of restoration, a promise that broken things could be made beautiful again. She thought about Colton sitting on the porch steps, saying the place felt different with her in it. Thought about his son's angry call and the grief that still lived in his voice when he spoke of Sarah. Thought about her own years of being told she was worthless and how that poison had settled into her bones, making her believe it. Maybe they were both quilts in need of mending, worn and torn and set aside. But here, in this house on this remote Wyoming ranch, maybe they could repair each other with the same careful patience she was bringing to Sarah's handiwork. The thought both terrified and comforted her. Clara Mae turned off the lamp and made her way to bed, where she lay in the darkness and listened to Colton moving around upstairs, the sound of water running, footsteps crossing the floor, the creak of bed springs as he settled for the night. She wasn't alone in this house, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, that felt like a gift instead of an obligation. The pocket watch appeared on the third Sunday, during what had become their custom of lingering over coffee after breakfast. Colton set it on the table between them, the gold case catching the morning light. It was old, worn smooth by decades of handling, the engraving on the back nearly illegible. "My father's," Colton said. "He carried it every day of his adult life. Worked this ranch for 47 years with that watch in his pocket." Clara Mae leaned closer, careful not to touch without permission. "It's beautiful. He gave it to me the day I married Sarah, said it was time for it to pass to the next generation, that I'd earned it by choosing a good woman and promising to build a life." He picked up the watch, turned it over in his weathered hands. "I've carried it every day since. Feels wrong not to have it with me. Your father, is he, died 15 years ago. Heart attack while mending fence? Quick, at least. He wouldn't have wanted to linger." Colton opened the watch, showed her the face. The hands had stopped at 3:47. "That's when Sarah died. 3:47 in the afternoon. I was holding her hand when she took her last breath, and I looked at this watch to mark the time for the death certificate. It stopped right then. Haven't been able to get it started since." The weight of that moment hung in the air. Clara Mae understood the significance. Time itself had stopped when he lost her. "Have you had anyone look at it?" "No, part of me thinks—" He paused, struggling with the words. "Part of me thinks maybe it stopped for a reason. Maybe some things aren't meant to move forward." Clara Mae thought about that, about how grief could freeze a person in place, could make them believe that moving on meant betraying what was lost. "My mother had a music box," she said quietly. "It played a lullaby she used to sing to me before I got sick. After the polio, after I couldn't walk anymore, she put the music box away. Said it made her too sad. I found it years later in the attic. The mechanism had rusted from disuse. It wouldn't play anymore." She met his eyes. "I always wondered if she was trying to stop time too, to preserve the version of me she'd lost. But that's not how time works. No, it moves whether we want it to or not. The question is whether we move with it or stay frozen." Colton closed the watch carefully, slipped it back into his pocket. "You're a wise woman, Clara Mae. Just someone who's had a lot of time to think." They sat with their coffee, the conversation opening something between them that had been carefully locked before. Colton talked about building the ranch with Sarah, about the early years when money was tight and they'd eaten more beans than beef, about the joy of finally turning a profit, of seeing their herd grow, about Michael's birth, the way Sarah had glowed with motherhood. Clara Mae shared her own carefully selected memories, her childhood before the illness, when she'd loved to paint and run through the fields. The moment she'd realized her legs wouldn't work anymore, the terror and confusion, the slow withdrawal of her parents' affection, so gradual she'd almost convinced herself she was imagining it. "Marcus was 12 when I got sick," she said. "Old enough to understand what it meant for him. He'd always be the capable one now, the one they relied on. I think he resented me not for being sick, but for giving him that burden of expectation. That's generous of you. I've had 43 years to make peace with it. Or try to." The moment broke when they heard the mail truck on the road. Colton went to check the mailbox, a weekly event that usually brought nothing but bills and agricultural magazines. Today, though, he returned with his face set in hard lines. "Letter for you," he said, handing her an envelope. Clara Mae recognized the handwriting immediately. Marcus. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. The letter was brief, written in her brother's careless scrawl. "Clara Mae, I hope this finds you well settled. I wanted to check in and make sure the arrangement is working out satisfactorily. Mr. Raye seemed like a decent sort, and I trust you're fulfilling your obligations. Please write back to let me know if any issues have arisen. The farm is doing better now with the extra capital. I've made several improvements that should..." She stopped reading. The words blurred as anger rose hot and sharp in her chest. Extra capital. The money Marcus had gotten for selling her like livestock. Money he'd used to improve the property he'd stolen from her. Arrangement, as if she were a piece of furniture delivered to fill a space. Obligations, as if she owed anything to anyone after being discarded like trash. Clara Mae. Colton's voice came from somewhere distant. She realized her hands had crumpled the letter, her knuckles white with tension. "He wants to know if the arrangement is working out," she said, her voice shaking with fury. "If I'm fulfilling my obligations, as if I'm a contract he needs to check up on." She threw the letter on the table. Years of swallowed anger, of accepting her place, of being grateful for scraps came pouring out. "I spent my entire life trying to be less trouble, trying to take up less space, trying to deserve the air I breathed. And he sold me. He took money for me and wants to make sure his investment is performing adequately." Colton picked up the letter, read it quickly, his expression darkening. "He's checking on his property." "I'm not property." "No, you're not." "And he's—" Colton bit off whatever word he was going to use. "What do you want to do?" The question startled her. "What? You want me to call him? Tell him exactly what kind of man he is? You want to write him back, tell him to—" He stopped himself again. "Or you want to throw this away and never think about it again? Your choice, your choice." Those words again. The gift Colton kept giving her. Clara Mae looked at the crumpled letter, at Marcus's casual cruelty disguised as concern. She thought about the little girl in the photograph, holding her ribbon with pride. Thought about the years of shrinking herself to fit into spaces too small for any human soul. "I want to throw it away," she said. "I want to forget he exists." "Then that's what we'll do." Colton picked up the letter, walked to the fireplace, struck a match. The paper caught quickly, flaring bright before crumbling to ash. He stood watching it burn, his back to her, giving her time to collect herself. When he returned to the table, his voice was gentle but firm. "You don't owe him anything. Not answers, not gratitude, not peace of mind. You're here because you chose to stay, not because of anything he did." She nodded, not trusting her voice. That evening, Colton did something unexpected. He pulled out an old radio from a cabinet, fiddled with the dial until he found a station playing country music. The sound filled the house, guitars and fiddles and voices singing about lost love and found redemption. "Sarah and I used to dance in this room," he said, "every Saturday night after the work was done. It was our ritual." Clara Mae smiled, despite the heaviness in her chest. "That sounds lovely. She'd probably tell me I'm getting too serious in my old age, that I need to remember how to enjoy things." He turned up the volume slightly. "You like music?" "I used to. We had a radio when I was young before—" She waved a hand at the wheelchair. "My father sold it when times got tight." They sat listening to the music, letting it wash over the anger and grief, softening the sharp edges. A song came on about second chances, about finding love when you'd stopped looking for it. Clara Mae found herself humming along to the chorus. Colton looked at her with surprise. "You've got a pretty voice." She felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I haven't sung in years." "Well, you should. House could use some music in it." The next song was upbeat, something about a cowboy and his wayward horse. Colton started tapping his foot, and Clara Mae found herself laughing, actually laughing, at the absurdity of the lyrics. The sound felt rusty, unpracticed, but it felt good too, real. Colton's face broke into a grin. "There it is." "What?" "First time I've heard you laugh." "Was starting to wonder if you knew how. I'd forgotten, I think." They stayed up late that night, listening to the radio and talking about easier things, favorite songs, worst weather they'd ever experienced, the strange things cattle sometimes did. The conversation flowed naturally, punctuated by comfortable silences and shared smiles. When Clara Mae finally said goodnight and headed to her room, she felt different, lighter somehow, as if burning Marcus's letter had released something she'd been carrying for too long. She transferred to her bed and lay in the darkness, listening to the music still playing softly in the other room. Colton hadn't turned it off. Maybe he needed it too, she thought. Maybe they both needed reminders that life wasn't just about surviving, about carrying wounds and grief. Maybe it was also about moments of unexpected laughter, about music filling empty spaces, about the tentative comfort of someone who saw you clearly and didn't turn away. The pocket watch, with its stopped hands, flashed through her mind. Time had frozen for Colton when Sarah died, but maybe slowly it was starting to move again. Maybe they both were learning that moving forward didn't mean forgetting what came before. It just meant choosing not to stay broken forever. Clara Mae found the letters while dusting the bookshelf in the living room. They were tucked behind a row of leather-bound books about cattle breeding and ranch management, a thick bundle wrapped with twine, yellowed with age. She pulled them out carefully, saw her name wasn't on them, and nearly put them back. But the top envelope was addressed in Colton's careful hand. Michael Raye, Denver, Colorado. No return address, no postmark, unsent. She held the bundle, torn between respecting his privacy and the realization that these letters represented something important. The weight of them, the sheer number, there must have been 30 or 40 envelopes, spoke of years of words never spoken, feelings never shared. That evening after dinner, she set the bundle on the table between them. Colton froze when he saw them. "Where did you—" "Behind the books. I was dusting." She kept her voice gentle. "I didn't read them. But I wanted you to know I found them." He stared at the letters as if they were something dangerous. "I should have thrown those away. Why didn't you?" "I don't know. Couldn't bring myself to, I guess." He reached out, pulled the bundle toward him. Started writing the first one about a month after Sarah's funeral. Michael had just left. Said he couldn't stand to be here anymore, couldn't stand to look at me. I wanted to explain, to make him understand. So I wrote it all down. But you never sent it. What was the point? He'd made up his mind about me, about what I'd done. Colton's fingers traced the twine binding the letters together. I kept writing anyway. Every time something happened that I wanted to tell him about, a good calving season. The time I saw a mountain lion on the ridge. When your brother's letter came, and I realized someone else's family had treated them worse than I'd ever treated Michael, I wrote it down, kept writing even though I knew I'd never send them. Clara Mae understood that kind of futile hope, the need to speak even when no one was listening. "What did he blame you for exactly?" Colton was silent for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was rough with old pain. "Sarah started feeling tired about 4 years ago. Thought it was just age, working too hard, but it kept getting worse. Finally went to the doctor, and they found cancer. Liver. They said there was an experimental treatment in California, a clinical trial. But our insurance wouldn't cover it, and we'd have to pay out of pocket, relocate, rent a place near the hospital, cover all the costs. It would have meant selling part of the ranch, maybe losing everything we'd built." He stopped, gathered himself. "Sarah said it was fine, that the doctors here could manage it, that we didn't need to uproot our whole lives for something that might not work anyway. She said she trusted me to make the right choice. So I said no to California. We did the standard treatment here, and she died 18 months later, and Michael thinks I chose the ranch over his mother, that I let her die to protect my property. Maybe he's right." Clara Mae reached across the table, stopped just short of touching his hand. "Did Sarah want to go? Really want to? Or was she telling you the truth about trusting your judgment?" "I've asked myself that every day for 3 years. I'll never know for sure. But you think you know," Colton met her eyes. "I think she meant what she said. Sarah never lied to spare feelings. If she'd wanted California, she would have told me. But that doesn't change the fact that maybe I should have insisted. Maybe I should have sold everything, taken the chance, even if she said not to. And maybe the treatment wouldn't have worked, and you'd have lost both her and the ranch, and Michael would blame you for that instead." Clara Mae spoke firmly. "Grief makes people cruel sometimes, makes them need someone to blame because the alternative, accepting that some things just happen, that we don't always get to save the people we love, is too hard to bear. You sound like you're speaking from experience." "I am. When my parents died, part of me was furious with them, for leaving me with Marcus, for never making provisions to protect me, for dying before they could tell me they loved me one more time. The anger was easier than admitting I just missed them, despite everything. Colton picked up the bundle of letters. What did you do with the anger? Eventually, let it go. Held on to it for a while first, though. Anger feels like power when you've got nothing else. And your brother, you let go of anger at him too? Clara Mae considered that. I'm working on it. Some days are easier than others. They sat with that honesty. Outside, the October wind picked up, rattling the windows. The first real cold was moving in from the mountains. You ever think about calling him? Clara Mae ventured. Not to defend yourself or explain. Just to, I don't know, let him know you're still here. What would I say? The truth. That you love him, that you miss him, that you made the best choice you could with the information you had, that you're sorry he's hurting. Colton laughed bitterly. That's simple. Simple doesn't mean easy. She pulled back, gave him space. But those letters, they're proof you never stopped trying to reach him. Maybe he should know that. The conversation lingered between them for days after. Colton left the letters on the bookshelf instead of hiding them again, as if Clara Mae's finding them had broken some seal on his ability to acknowledge them. Meanwhile, something else was developing. Clara Mae had been doing physical therapy exercises the doctor in North Carolina had taught her years ago, stretches and movements meant to maintain what mobility she had. She usually did them in private, in her room. But one afternoon, Colton came in from work early and found her on the floor beside her wheelchair, struggling with a particularly difficult stretch. You need help? He asked from the doorway. She flushed, embarrassed to be caught in such a vulnerable position. I can manage. I know you can. I asked if you needed help. The distinction mattered. After a moment, she nodded. If you could just, there's a strap that needs to loop around my foot. I can't quite reach it. Colton crossed the room, knelt beside her. His hands were careful, gentle, as he helped position the strap. Like this? Yes, thank you. He didn't leave. What else? And so it began, a new routine where Colton helped with her therapy exercises. He learned which stretches she struggled with, where she needed support, how to apply the right amount of pressure without hurting her. His hands on her legs were clinical at first, focused on the task. But as days passed, they became something more, still respectful, still careful, but charged with an awareness neither of them acknowledged aloud. One evening, helping her stretch her hip flexors, his hand brushed against her waist. They both froze. The touch lasted only a second before they pulled back simultaneously. But it left Clara Mae's skin tingling with heat that had nothing to do with the exercise. Sorry, Colton muttered. Don't be. Their eyes met. Something passed between them. Recognition, want, fear. Then Colton stood abruptly, put distance between them. Getting late. I should check on the livestock before full dark. He left quickly. Clara Mae transferred back to her wheelchair and sat there, her heart pounding. She pressed her hand to where his had touched, feeling the warmth still lingering on her skin. This was dangerous territory. She'd been here only a month. He was still grieving his wife. She was broken in ways that went deeper than her legs. Getting involved, feeling things, would be foolish at best, devastating at worst. But her body didn't care about logic. Her heart didn't care about timing. Somewhere in the daily routines, the shared meals, the comfortable silences and growing conversations, she'd started to feel something she'd thought herself incapable of feeling, something she'd convinced herself she didn't deserve. That night, Clara Mae lay awake long after the house fell silent. She listened to Colton moving around upstairs, heard the creak of his bed when he finally settled. The darkness pressed close, and with it came unwelcome truths. She was falling in love with him. The realization terrified her. Love had never been kind to her. Love had been conditional, withdrawn, weaponized. Her family had taught her that love was something earned through perfect behavior and lost through imperfection. And she was nothing if not imperfect. What happened when Colton realized what she was feeling? Would he pity her? Send her away? Or worse, would he feel obligated to return feelings he didn't have, trapped by the same decency that had made him let her stay in the first place? Clara Mae pulled the quilt, Sarah's quilt now nearly finished, up to her chin. She thought about the pocket watch with its stopped hands, about the unsent letters to a son who wouldn't listen, about a man who'd spent 3 years frozen in grief. She thought about her own years of believing she wasn't worthy of being chosen, of being seen as whole rather than broken. Maybe they were both too damaged for this. Maybe the kindness she felt from him was just that, kindness, not love. Maybe she was reading meaning into gestures that meant nothing more than common decency. But his hand on her waist had trembled, and when their eyes met, she'd seen something in his gaze that looked an awful lot like longing. The question was what to do about it, and whether they were brave enough or foolish enough to find out. Autumn settled over the ranch in earnest. The aspens turned gold against the dark pines, and morning frosts silvered the grass. 6 weeks had passed since Clara Mae's arrival, and the changes were visible everywhere, in the repaired quilts folded on the sofa, in the organized kitchen cabinets, in the way the house smelled of fresh bread and wood smoke. But the biggest changes were in Clara Mae herself. The daily therapy exercises with Colton had strengthened her core and improved her balance. She could transfer from wheelchair to chair with more confidence now, could maneuver around the house with less effort. The work had awakened muscles long dormant, reminded her body that it was capable of more than she'd believed. More than the physical changes, though, was the shift in how she carried herself. The apologetic hunch of her shoulders had straightened. The habit of making herself small had faded. She moved through the house like someone who belonged there. Because she did. One evening in mid-October, as the sun painted the western sky in shades of amber and rose, Colton came to sit beside her on the porch. They'd fallen into this ritual, watching the sunset together, talking or not talking, simply existing in shared space. Tonight, he held something in his hand, turning it over and over with his thumb. "I want to show you something," he said. He opened his palm to reveal a silver locket on a delicate chain. The metal was tarnished with age, but still beautiful. He opened it carefully, showed her the photograph inside, a young woman with dark hair and warm eyes, smiling at something beyond the camera's frame. "Sarah," Clara Mae said softly, "on our wedding day." She was 24. I was 26. His voice held no pain now, just memory. This was her mother's locket. Sarah wore it every day until she got too sick to care about jewelry anymore. After she died, I put it in my drawer. Couldn't look at it. And now I wanted you to see her, to know her in a way. He studied the photograph. She was kind, stubborn as hell when she set her mind to something, laughed loud and didn't care who heard. She made this place feel alive. Clara Mae understood what this meant, him sharing this, speaking about Sarah without the weight of grief crushing each word. He was making space in his heart, acknowledging that loving someone who died didn't mean you couldn't love again. She was beautiful, Clara Mae said, inside and out. He closed the locket gently. But she's gone. And I'm still here. Took me a long time to accept that I'm allowed to keep living, to feel things again. He looked at Clara Mae directly. I wanted you to see this because you're part of that. Part of me feeling alive again. Her heart stuttered in her chest. Colton, you don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know. He stood, went back inside, leaving Clara Mae alone with the sunset and the weight of his words. She touched her chest, where her own heart was racing, trying to steady herself against the rush of feeling. The next day, Colton asked if she wanted to help with some ranch work. Nothing heavy, he assured her. But there's sorting and organizing in the barn that needs doing. Could use an extra pair of hands, she agreed, and he rigged a ramp so she could wheel into the barn. Together they organized tools, sorted hardware, catalogued supplies. It was simple work, practical, but it felt significant. She was contributing in a real way, her presence making his work easier. They fell into an easy rhythm, passing tools back and forth, discussing what went where. Sometimes their hands would brush, reaching for the same box, handing off a wrench, and each time the contact sent electricity through her. She wondered if he felt it too, the growing awareness that hummed between them like a live wire. You've got a system for everything, she observed. Watching him arrange wrenches by size, ranch life requires it. Chaos out here can be dangerous. He paused. Sarah taught me that. I used to just throw things wherever. She showed me that taking time to organize saves time later. She sounds like she was wise. She was. But you are too. The compliment caught her off guard. I don't know about that. I do. You've got a way of seeing things clearly. No drama, no fuss. Just truth. He met her eyes. I value that more than you know. They worked until the afternoon light began to fade, then returned to the house. That evening, they made dinner together. Colton handling the cooking while Clara Mae prepared vegetables, their movements coordinated like dancers who'd practiced the steps. The radio played softly in the background, and when a slow song came on, Colton hummed along. After dinner, they returned to the porch despite the cooling air. Colton brought blankets, draped one over Clara Mae's lap. They sat watching the stars emerge, Venus bright in the western sky. I never thought anyone would see me as whole, Clara Mae said suddenly. The words came unbidden, pulled from somewhere deep. After the illness, I became the girl in the wheelchair. That was my identity. Not Clara Mae who loved to paint, or Clara Mae who could do arithmetic in her head, or Clara Mae who could name every constellation. Just the disabled one, the burden. Colton was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was firm. I've never seen you as anything but complete, but you're exactly what you're supposed to be. The wheelchair is part of your life, not the sum of it. You're Clara Mae, who makes bread that tastes like heaven. Clara Mae, who repaired my wife's quilts with more care than they'd seen in years. Clara Mae, who isn't afraid to call me on my nonsense. Clara Mae, who makes this house feel like a home again. He turned to look at her. That's who I see. Every day, all of you. And none of it is broken. Tears blurred her vision. I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, but she wanted to. Wanted to tell him that she saw him too, saw past the grief and guilt to the man underneath. The man who was gentle and strong and lonely and brave enough to let someone in despite the risk of loss. The man she was falling in love with, whether it was wise or not. Instead, she reached across the space between their chairs and took his hand. His fingers closed around hers, warm, calloused, solid. They sat like that as darkness deepened, holding hands like teenagers, neither speaking, both terrified and exhilarated by the simple contact. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of coming weather. In the distance, lightning flickered against the mountains. Storms coming, Colton observed. Yes, but they didn't move. They sat holding hands, while the first drops of rain began to fall, neither willing to break the moment. Finally, when the rain intensified, Colton squeezed her hand gently and stood. We should get inside before we're soaked. They moved into the house, and Colton closed the door against the storm. Water ran down the windows in sheets, and thunder rumbled across the valley. Clara Mae positioned her wheelchair near the fireplace, while Colton lit the kindling. Soon, flames danced in the hearth, casting warm light across the room. They sat together watching the fire, listening to the storm rage outside. The house felt like a shelter against more than just weather. It felt like a place where two broken people could exist without pretense, could let down their guards and simply be, but underneath the comfort ran a current of tension. The awareness between them had grown impossible to ignore. Every glance held meaning. Every casual touch sent sparks through skin. They were dancing around something neither quite dared to name, afraid that naming it would make it real, and therefore vulnerable to loss. Clara Mae, Colton said, then stopped. Yes? Never mind. It's late. We should probably turn in. But he didn't move, and neither did she. They stayed by the fire, the storm providing cover for the emotions storming inside them both. Bundly, Clara Mae broke the silence. I'm glad I'm here. I just wanted you to know that. His expression softened. I'm glad you're here too. More than glad, she thought. But maybe he wasn't ready to say it yet. Maybe she wasn't either. Some things needed time to build, needed to be approached carefully like a nervous horse. One wrong move, and it would bolt. So they said goodnight and went to their separate rooms, both lying awake listening to the storm, both wondering what would happen when they finally stopped pretending. They were just two lonely people sharing space and admitted they'd become something more. The lawyer arrived 3 days after the storm, his sedan struggling up the muddy ranch road. Clara Mae was in the kitchen kneading bread when she heard the unfamiliar engine. Colton was out checking fence lines damaged by wind. She wheeled to the window and watched a man in a suit climb out of the car, briefcase in hand, looking utterly out of place against the backdrop of mountains and cattle. He knocked. Clara Mae opened the door to find a thin man in his 50s with wire-rimmed glasses and a nervous expression. "Clara Mae Hutchins?" he asked. The use of her full name, spoken by a stranger, sent a chill through her. "Yes, my name is Richard Porter. I'm an attorney from Asheville. May I come in? I've been trying to find you for 6 weeks." She let him in, her mind racing through possibilities, none of them good. Marcus sending legal threats? Some unpaid debt she didn't know about? She positioned her wheelchair to face the sofa, where the lawyer sat perched on the edge, his briefcase on his knees. "Miss Hutchins, I need to ask you some questions. First, did your brother Marcus tell you why he was sending you to Wyoming?" "He said I was sold to settle a debt." Porter's jaw tightened. "I see. And did he provide you with any documentation? Any papers to sign?" "No. He just put me in a truck and sent me here." The lawyer opened his briefcase, pulled out a folder thick with documents. "Miss Hutchins, I'm afraid your brother has committed fraud. Potentially several kinds of fraud." He set a document on the table, a property deed. "This is the deed to your family's farm in North Carolina. According to county records and your parents' will, the property was left equally to you and your brother." Clara Mae stared at the deed. "I didn't know that. Marcus told you differently?" "He said the farm was his, that I lived there on his charity. The old shame tried to rise, but something else was building underneath it, something hot and sharp. That was a lie. Your parents' will explicitly states that the property was to be divided equally. However, it also stipulated that neither sibling could sell without the other's consent." Porter pulled out more papers. 6 months ago, Marcus forged your signature on a quitclaim deed, signing over your half of the property to himself. Then he took out a loan against the full value of the farm. The room spun. Clara Mae gripped the armrests of her wheelchair. "He forged my signature." "Yes. And then, and this is where it gets more complicated, he appears to have fabricated a debt. There's no record of any legitimate loan or obligation that would have required payment to Mr. Colton Raye. The money your brother sent Mr. Raye appears to have come from guilt, or perhaps from a desire to make the situation seem more legitimate than abandonment. So there was no debt. No debt. No legal arrangement. Your brother stole your inheritance and discarded you, Miss Hutchins. I'm very sorry." The words landed like physical blows. Clara Mae sat in stunned silence, trying to process what she was hearing. Everything Marcus had said was a lie. She hadn't been sold to pay a debt. She'd been thrown away because he wanted her gone. The farm that should have been half hers was stolen through forgery. The only home she'd ever known had never actually stopped being hers until Marcus had fraudulently taken it. "How did you find out?" she managed to ask. A clerk at the county office flagged the signature discrepancy. "Your signatures on older documents didn't match the recent one." She referred it to the sheriff, who contacted me. "They've been trying to track you down since early September." Porter leaned forward. "Miss Hutchins, you have legal recourse. We can pursue charges for fraud, forgery, and potentially elder abuse. We can challenge the quitclaim deed, reclaim your portion of the property. The question is, what do you want to do?" Before Clara Mae could answer, the front door opened. Colton came in, mud on his boots, and stopped short when he saw the lawyer. "Everything all right?" "Mr. Raye?" Porter stood, extended his hand. "Richard Porter. I'm an attorney from North Carolina. I've been explaining to Ms. Hutchins that her situation here was based on fraudulent pretenses." Colton's expression hardened as Porter quickly summarized the situation. Clara Mae watched Colton's hands curl into fists, saw the fury building in his face. "So she was never sold," Colton said, his voice dangerously quiet. "She was robbed and abandoned." "That's correct." Colton looked at Clara Mae, and she saw protective rage warring with concern. "What do you need?" he asked her. "You want me to call the sheriff back there? You want to press charges? Say the word, and I'll make it happen." His fierce protectiveness moved her, but she needed time to think. "Mr. Porter, could you give me a few days? It's a lot to process." "Of course. I'm staying in Elkhorn. Here's my card. Call when you're ready to discuss your options." He stood, gathered his papers. "For what it's worth, Miss Hutchins, I think you have a strong case. Your brother's actions were criminal. You deserve restitution." After Porter left, Colton paced the kitchen like a caged wolf. "That son of a—" He bit off the curse. "I want to drive to North Carolina right now and make him answer for what he did. Colton, he didn't just steal from you. He threw you away like garbage. And he made me part of it, made me think I was helping when really I was just—" He stopped, ran his hands through his hair. "I'm sorry. I'm making this about me when you're the one who just found out your own brother." "Stop!" Clara Mae's voice cut through his anger. "Just stop and sit down." He sat, still vibrating with fury. Clara Mae wheeled close to him, needed to see his face clearly. "I need to think about this," she said. "Not react, think. What's to think about? He committed fraud. He stole from you." "Yes. And I need to decide what that means for me now." She took a breath, tried to organize the chaos in her head. "All my life, I've believed certain things about myself. That I was a burden. That my family tolerated me out of obligation. That I deserved whatever scraps I was given because I was fundamentally less than whole. Clara Mae, let me finish. Finding out the farm was mine, that changes everything. Not because of the property itself, but because it means my parents valued me enough to leave me half. It means I had worth that Marcus stole, not just money, but identity." Her voice shook. "He didn't just take land. He took my ability to see myself as someone who deserved to inherit, to own, to belong." Colton's anger shifted to something gentler. "What do you want to do?" "I don't know yet. Part of me wants to fight, to make him pay for what he did. To stand up in court and tell everyone how he treated me." She paused. "But another part of me thinks, what would I get back? A piece of a farm I never want to see again. Money from selling property that holds nothing but bad memories? Would that make me whole? It might give you justice. Maybe. Or maybe it would just tie me to him for years of legal battles, force me to relive every humiliation, every moment of being told I was worthless." She met his eyes. "I've spent 6 weeks here learning that I'm not worthless, learning that I can be valued for who I am, not pitied for what I can't do. Why would I want to go back, even to fight?" Colton was quiet for a long moment. "So you're saying you want to let it go?" "I'm saying I want to choose what matters to me. And Marcus's opinion, his crimes, they don't matter anymore. He can't hurt me if I don't let him. He can't take from me what I've already left behind. That's generous of you. More generous than he deserves. It's not generous. It's self-preservation." Clara Mae felt tears building, but didn't try to stop them. "If I fight him, he wins. He keeps control over my life, my thoughts, my future. But if I walk away, if I choose to stay here and build something new, then he's lost everything. Because the burden he threw away wasn't a burden at all. And the life he thought he was condemning me to is the best thing that ever happened to me." The words hung in the air, honest and raw. Colton's expression shifted, softened, opened. "Clara Mae, I love you," she said. The words came out simple, true, terrifying. "I didn't mean to. I tried not to. But somewhere between the first morning and now, I fell in love with you, with this place, with the life we're building. And I don't want to waste time fighting Marcus when I could be spending it here. With you." Colton stood, crossed to her, knelt so their faces were level. His hands came up to frame her face, gentle and sure. "I love you too," he said. "Probably loved you from the moment you wheeled onto this porch with your chin up and your eyes daring me to pity you. You're the bravest person I know, the strongest. And I don't give a damn about your brother or that farm or any of it. I only care that you're here, that you're choosing to stay, that you're—" His voice broke. "That you're mine. If you want to be, I want to be." He kissed her then, soft and careful at first, then deeper as she responded. His hands were gentle on her face, in her hair, and hers found his shoulders pulling him closer. The kiss tasted of tears and promise, and the beginning of something neither of them had expected to find. When they finally pulled apart, Both breathless, Colton rested his forehead against hers. "What do you want to do about the lawyer?" he asked. Clara Mae considered. "I want to sign papers that give Marcus full ownership of that farm, no contest. I want him to have what he stole so badly that he committed fraud. And I want him to know that I'm choosing to give it to him, that I don't need it or want it, that I've found something so much better than land or money or his approval." "You sure?" "I'm sure. The only thing worth fighting for is right here." They stayed like that, holding each other as the afternoon light shifted toward evening. Outside, the ranch went about its business. Cattle grazing, wind in the pines, the endless Wyoming sky stretching overhead. Inside, two people who'd been broken and discarded had found something neither expected. They'd found home. And more than that, they'd found the courage to choose it. The decision came to Clara Mae in the quiet hours before dawn. She lay in bed watching darkness give way to gray light and knew with absolute certainty what she needed to do. When she heard Colton moving around upstairs, she dressed quickly and made her way to the kitchen. He looked surprised to see her up so early. "Couldn't sleep?" "I know what I want to do about the farm." She accepted the coffee he poured her. "I want to sign it all over to a charity, something for disabled children, or veterans, people who need help and don't have family to provide it." Colton sat down across from her. "You're sure? That's a lot of money to give away." "It was never really mine, not in any meaningful way. Marcus stole it, but keeping it would feel like I'm still tied to that whole mess. If I give it away, if I turn something ugly into something good, then maybe it means something." She met his eyes. "I don't need money. I need peace. And I won't find that clinging to property that represents nothing but pain." He reached across the table, took her hand. "You're something else, you know that? I'm just trying to do what feels right. Most people wouldn't see it that way. Most people would fight for every penny. I'm not most people. And honestly, watching you these past weeks, seeing how you've made a life here, how you've built something real with your hands and your heart, that's worth more than any inheritance. That's what I want. A life I've chosen, not one I inherited or was forced into." The lawyer, Mr. Porter, returned the next day. Clara Mae explained her decision. He tried to talk her out of it, citing the substantial value of the property, but she remained firm. By afternoon, papers were drawn up, transferring her share of the farm to a foundation that provided mobility equipment for children with disabilities. Marcus would get nothing from her but silence. The charity would get everything. When Porter left with the signed documents, Clara Mae felt lighter than she had in years. Colton watched her from across the room, and she saw something in his expression: admiration, pride, love. It made her heart skip. "You just gave away a small fortune," he said. "I just got rid of a weight I've been carrying my whole life." She smiled. "Best trade I ever made." Over the next few days, something shifted between them. The confession of love hadn't led to dramatic changes, no grand gestures or passionate declarations. Instead, it had settled into their daily life like a warm undercurrent, present in every small interaction. Colton's hand on her shoulder when he passed behind her chair, Clara Mae's fingers brushing his when she handed him his coffee. The way they looked at each other across the dinner table, conversations unfolding in glances and small smiles. But underneath the growing intimacy ran threads of uncertainty. Clara Mae caught Colton looking at Sarah's photograph on the mantel with an expression she couldn't read. Was he feeling guilty, disloyal? She understood. You couldn't love someone for 30 years and not feel complicated things when you tried to love again. Her own fears surfaced late at night. What if this didn't last? What if Colton realized she really was too much trouble, too limited, too broken? What if his love was just loneliness disguised as something deeper? One evening, a neighbor stopped by, Tom Henderson, who ranched the property to the east. He was dropping off a borrowed tool, but he lingered on the porch, clearly curious about the woman who'd appeared at Colton's ranch. "Tom, this is Clara Mae." Colton introduced them. He paused, and Clara Mae saw him choose his words carefully. "She's staying here?" "Good for you, Colt," Tom said, and his knowing smile made Clara Mae blush. "About time you stopped rattling around this place alone." Sarah would have wanted... He stopped himself. Well, she would have wanted you to be happy. After Tom left, Clara Mae and Colton sat on the porch in awkward silence. He thinks we're together, Clara Mae said finally. Yeah. Does that bother you? Colton was quiet for a long moment. No, it bothers me that I'm not bothered. Does that make sense? You feel guilty for not feeling guilty. Something like that. He turned to look at her. I loved Sarah with everything I had. Still love her in a way. But she's gone. And you're here. And what I feel for you, it's not the same as what I felt for her, but it's real. You don't have to explain. I want to. I need you to understand that you're not a replacement. You're not Sarah come back. You're Clara Mae, and I love you for exactly who you are. But sometimes I feel like I'm betraying her memory by being happy again. Clara Mae wheeled closer, took his hand. Colton, love isn't a finite resource. The love you gave Sarah doesn't diminish because you have love for me. And being happy again, living again, that's not betrayal. That's honoring the life she wanted you to have. How are you so wise? I've had a lot of time to think about what it means to live versus just survive. That night, Colton disappeared upstairs for a while after dinner. Clara Mae heard him moving around, drawers opening and closing. When he came back down, he looked both lighter and heavier somehow. I need to make a phone call, he said. He picked up the phone, dialed a number he'd clearly memorized. Clara Mae started to wheel toward her room to give him privacy, but he gestured for her to stay. The phone rang several times. Clara Mae expected voicemail, but then she heard a faint voice answer. Michael, it's Dad. Don't hang up. I'm not calling to argue or explain or defend myself. I just want to say some things, and then I'll let you go. Colton's voice was steady but thick with emotion. I loved your mother more than anything in this world, except you. I made the best choice I could with the information I had. Maybe it was the wrong choice. I'll never know. But I've spent 3 years letting guilt and grief run my life, and I'm tired of it. I'm tired of being frozen in that moment when I lost her. He paused, listening. Clara Mae couldn't hear Michael's response, but Colton nodded. I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But holding on to that anger, it's not hurting me, son. It's hurting you. And it would have broken your mother's heart to see us like this. Another pause. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just saying that I love you. I miss you. And if you ever want to talk, really talk, I'm here. That's all. He hung up gently. When he turned, there were tears on his face. He listened, Colton said, wonder in his voice. He didn't hang up. He actually listened. Clara Mae held out her arms, and he came to her, kneeling beside the wheelchair so she could hold him. I'm proud of you. Couldn't have done it without you. Without seeing how you let go of your own anger. It made me realize I've been clinging to things that don't serve me anymore. Guilt, grief, isolation. Time to let go. They stayed like that for a while, holding each other in the quiet house. When Colton finally pulled back, he kissed her forehead, then her cheek, then hesitated at her mouth. Is this okay? He asked. Yes, he kissed her softly, a question and an answer all at once. Clara Mae felt something inside her unfurl, like a flower opening to sun. This was what she'd been missing her whole life, not just being loved, but being chosen, being seen completely and wanted anyway. Later, after Clara Mae had gone to bed, Colton sat alone in the living room. The house was quiet except for the tick of the clock and the occasional creak of settling wood. He stood, crossed to the mantel, and took down the small wooden box he kept there. Inside was Sarah's wedding ring. He'd put it away after the funeral. Couldn't bear to look at it. But tonight he needed to. He held the simple gold band in his palm, remembering the day he'd slipped it on her finger. They'd been so young, so certain, so in love. 32 years that ring had circled her finger. A promise kept through joy and hardship, laughter and tears, right up until cancer took her away. I'll always love you, he whispered to the ring, to Sarah's memory. But I'm ready to move forward now. I need you to know. It doesn't mean I love you less. It means I'm finally strong enough to love again. He'd kept his own wedding ring on for 3 years after Sarah died. Couldn't bring himself to remove it. Now slowly he twisted it off his finger. It left a pale band of skin beneath, a ghost of what had been. He placed both rings in the box, closed it gently. On the mantel, Sarah's photograph smiled at him. He picked it up, studied her face one more time. "She's good for me," he told the photograph. "Clara Mae, she's nothing like you, but that's okay. She's exactly who I need right now. I think you'd like her. I think you'd tell me to stop being an idiot and scared and to just—" He smiled. "You'd tell me to love her like I mean it. So that's what I'm going to do." He set the photograph down, not putting it away, but also not letting it dominate the space anymore. Then he climbed the stairs to his room, his hand feeling strange without the weight of the ring, his heart feeling lighter than it had in years. Tomorrow, he decided. Tomorrow he'd tell Clara Mae everything. That he wanted her to stay, not just as a guest or a friend, but as his partner. That he wanted to build a life with her, whatever that looked like. That he was ready, finally completely ready, to move forward. The pocket watch in his dresser still showed 3:47, time frozen at the moment of loss. But Colton Raye was done being frozen. It was time to let time move again, to let life continue, to let love in. Tomorrow, he'd tell her. And then they'd figure out together what came next. Morning came with clear skies and frost glittering on the grass. Clara Mae woke to the smell of coffee and something else. Wood smoke from the fireplace, and underneath it, the earthy scent of pine. She dressed and made her way to the kitchen, where Colton stood by the window, holding something in his hands. He turned when he heard her wheels. In the morning light, his expression was soft, open, almost nervous. "I made you something," he said. He held out a walking stick, and Clara Mae's breath caught. It was beautiful work, carved from rich wood that had been sanded smooth and polished to a warm glow. The handle was shaped to fit a hand comfortably, wrapped in leather for grip. Along the shaft, delicate carvings spiraled down, patterns of pine branches and mountains, each detail precise and loving. "You made this?" Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Been working on it for a few weeks now. Out in the barn during lunch breaks." He brought it closer. "Your therapy has been going so well. Your balance is better, your core strength. I thought maybe you'd like to try standing more, walking a little. With support." Clara Mae took the walking stick with trembling hands. The wood was solid, substantial. She could feel the hours of work that had gone into it, the care and hope carved into every surface. "I don't know if I can—" "You can." His voice was firm but gentle. "I've been watching you. You're stronger than you think. Stronger than you've been allowed to believe." She looked up at him, saw the absolute conviction in his eyes. He believed in her, not hoped or wished, believed. When had anyone last believed in her capability instead of managing around her limitations? "Will you help me?" "Always." He positioned the wheelchair beside one of the kitchen chairs. Clara Mae transferred to the chair, tested her balance. Colton handed her the walking stick, then stood nearby, close enough to catch her if needed, far enough to give her space. "Ready?" he asked. She gripped the walking stick with her right hand, used the chair arm for support with her left. Then, gathering every ounce of courage and strength, she pushed herself up. Her legs shook. The muscles, so long unused for standing, screamed in protest and effort. But they held. She was standing, truly standing, with only the stick and her own determination for support. "Oh my!" Tears blurred her vision. "I'm standing." "You're standing," Colton's voice was thick. "Now just one step. That's all. Just shift your weight and move that stick forward." Clara Mae focused everything on the simple act of movement. She shifted her weight to her left leg, moved the stick forward with her right hand, then dragged her right leg forward. One step, her leg nearly buckled, but the stick held firm, and she stayed upright. "Again," Colton said. "You've got it." Another step. Then another. Her breathing came hard, sweat breaking out on her forehead from the effort. But she was moving forward under her own power, her own strength. "3 steps, 4, 5, I'm walking," she gasped. "Colton, I'm actually walking." "I know. I knew you could." 6 steps, 7, and then her right leg gave out completely. She started to fall, but Colton was there instantly, catching her, holding her steady. His arms came around her waist, supporting her weight, and suddenly they were face to face, barely inches apart, her hands clutching his shoulders for balance. time suspended. Clara Mae's heart pounded from exertion and something else entirely. Colton's arms were solid around her, his face close enough that she could see the flecks of grey in his eyes, could feel his breath warm on her cheek. "I've got you," he said softly. "I've always got you." I walked. The words came out on a sob of joy and disbelief. 7 steps. "I haven't walked 7 steps in 43 years. You did more than walk. You proved every single person who ever underestimated you wrong." His grip tightened slightly. "Clara Mae, you're the bravest person I know. The strongest. Not because you can walk or can't walk, but because you never gave up on yourself even when everyone else did. You didn't give up on me. No, and I never will." He swallowed hard, gathering courage. "You brought life back to this house, back to me. Before you came, I was just existing, going through motions, waiting for time to pass. But now," his voice cracked, "now I wake up with purpose. Now I have someone to share breakfast with, someone to talk to, someone who sees me not as a grieving widower, but as a man. You did that. You brought my heart back to life." Clara Mae's tears spilled over. "Colton, I love you. I said it before, but I need you to hear it again. I love you, Clara Mae. I love your strength and your wisdom and your grace. I love how you fix Sarah's quilts with such care. I love the sound of your voice in the morning. I love that you're here, in this house, in my life. And I want you to stay, not as a guest, not as someone who helps out, but as my partner, He stopped, the word hanging unspoken between them. "Your partner," Clara Mae finished for him. "Yes, that's what I want too. But Colton," she had to say this, had to voice the fear that lived in her bones. "What if I'm too much? What if someday you wake up and realize I really am a burden? That you took me on out of kindness and got trapped with—" "Stop!" He said it firmly, his hands framing her face. "Listen to me. You're not a burden. You never were, and you never will be. Do you understand? The only thing I'm trapped by is how much I love you. How much I need you. Not to cook my meals or mend my clothes or any of that. I need you because you make me want to be alive again. Because when I see you working on those quilts, or managing the household, or pushing yourself in your therapy, I remember what it means to have purpose. To have someone to build a life with, but I can't. There are things I'll never be able to do. We'll figure it out together. That's what partners do. You help me, I help you. We build something that works for both of us." His thumbs wiped away her tears. "I'm not some saint taking you in. I'm a lonely man who got blessed with a second chance at love. You're not doing me a favor by staying. I'm the one who's grateful every single day that you chose this place. That you chose me." The words broke through every defense she'd built, every wall she'd erected around her heart. Clara Mae looked at this weathered, wonderful man and felt something fundamental shift inside her. "I love you," she said, simple and clear. "I love you so much it scares me. I love your kindness and your strength and the way you see me as whole when the world taught me I was broken. I love this ranch and this house and the life we're building. I love that you made me a walking stick because you believed I could use it. Her voice broke. "I love everything about you, Colton Raye. Then stay with me. Build a life with me. Marry me if you want, or don't, if marriage isn't important to you. I just want you here by my side for whatever time we have left in this world." Yes, the word came out on a breath. Yes to all of it. He kissed her then. And it was everything their first kiss hadn't been, not hesitant or questioning, but certain and deep and full of promise. His lips were warm against hers, his hands gentle in her hair, and she felt 43 years of loneliness and longing dissolve in the space of a heartbeat. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard, foreheads resting together. "We should probably get you sitting down," Colton said with a shaky laugh. "Can't have you collapsing from exhaustion after you just walked 7 steps. 8? If you count the one where I fell into your arms. I'm counting that one double." He helped her back to the wheelchair, and they sat at the kitchen table, hands clasped, both grinning like fools. They talked about practical things, how to manage the ranch together, what modifications they might need to make to the house, Whether Clara Mae wanted to learn about cattle management or preferred to focus on other aspects of ranch life. "I want to be a real partner," she said. "Not just in the house. I want to understand the whole operation, help where I can. We'll figure out what works. Maybe you can't ride the fence line, but you could manage the books, handle the business side. God knows I hate paperwork." They were still talking when the phone rang. Colton answered, and Clara Mae saw his whole body go still. "Michael," a pause. No, I'm glad you called." Another pause, longer. "Really? Yes, of course. Whenever works for you. The door's always open, son." When he hung up, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "He wants to come visit. In 2 weeks. Said he's been thinking about what I said, that maybe it's time to talk." Clara Mae felt her own tears rise. "That's wonderful. He asked if it was a good time, if I had anything going on. I told him," Colton smiled. "I told him I had someone I wanted him to meet, someone important to me." "You told him about me?" "About us. Not the details, just that I wasn't alone anymore, that I'd found someone who makes me happy." He squeezed her hand. He said he was glad, that Sarah would be glad too. They held each other, letting the joy and relief wash over them. Outside the window, the morning sun climbed higher, flooding the kitchen with warm light. Later, after the intensity of the morning had settled into comfortable contentment, they went out to look at the ranch gate. It had been bothering Colton for months, the wood weathered and splitting, the sign barely legible, hinges rusting. He'd meant to fix it, but never found the energy or motivation. "We should restore it," Clara Mae said, studying the gate. "Make it beautiful again, a symbol of new beginnings." Colton looked at her, then at the gate, then back at her. Together. You do the structural work. I'll paint the sign, make it something worth looking at." He kissed the top of her head. "I like the sound of that." Partners in everything. They stood there together, his arm around her shoulders, her hand over his on the wheelchair armrest, looking at the weathered gate and seeing not what it was, but what it could be, what they could make it together, a new beginning, a shared future, a life chosen freely and built with love. It was more than either of them had dared hope for, and it was only just beginning. 3 months later, the ranch wore a different face. The fences stood straight and strong, fresh paint gleaming white against the winter landscape. The barn door no longer hung crooked. The house itself seemed to sit taller somehow, as if remembering its purpose after years of merely existing. Inside, warmth radiated from the fireplace, where Colton kept a steady fire burning against the January cold. Clara Mae stood at the kitchen counter, her hand-carved walking stick leaning against the cabinet within easy reach. She used the wheelchair still. Some days her legs simply wouldn't cooperate, and she'd learned to accept that without shame. But other days, like today, she could stand for 20 minutes at a time, could walk from room to room with the stick's support, could feel her muscles working in ways they hadn't in 4 decades. The bread dough under her hands was soft and pliant, nearly ready for its second rise. Through the window, she could see Colton working on the south pasture fence, his breath puffing white in the cold air. He'd look up every so often, his eyes finding the house, finding her, a smile crossing his weathered face before he returned to his work. They'd fallen into rhythms as natural as breathing, morning coffee together, watching the sunrise. His work outside while she managed the house and the books. Turned out she had a head for numbers and had already found 3 ways to reduce expenses. Lunch together, comparing notes on the day. Afternoons of shared tasks or separate pursuits. Evenings by the fire, talking or reading or simply existing in comfortable silence. Nights when he'd hold her close, when they'd remind each other with gentle touches and whispered words that they were real. This was real. Love had found them when neither was looking. Michael had visited twice. The first time had been tense, full of careful conversations and old wounds barely covered. But Clara Mae had seen something shift when Colton introduced her, when Michael saw his father's face light up in a way it hadn't in years. The second visit, just after Christmas, had been easier. Michael had brought his girlfriend, and they'd all sat around the dinner table, sharing stories, building bridges over the chasms grief had carved. There was a photograph from that visit on the mantel now. Michael had taken it at the restored ranch gate. Colton standing tall, his arm around Clara Mae in her wheelchair, all three of them smiling at the camera. It sat where Sarah's solo photograph had lived for so long. The old picture was still in the house, but in the bedroom now, private. This new one occupied the public space, honoring what had been while celebrating what was. Clara Mae shaped the dough into loaves, set them to rise. She thought about her family, Marcus and the farm and all of it. The lawyer had called a month ago to confirm the property transfer to the charity was complete. Marcus had apparently been furious when he discovered what she'd done, had tried to contest it, but the law was clear. It was her inheritance to give away. She'd felt nothing when she heard that. No triumph, no anger, no regret. Just a quiet sense of closure. Marcus could live with his choices. She would live with hers. She forgave him, she realized. Not because he deserved forgiveness or because she needed to have a relationship with him. She forgave him for herself so she could stop carrying the weight of his cruelty. Forgiveness didn't mean forgetting or excusing. It just meant refusing to let the past poison the present. Her parents, too. She'd made peace with their failures. They'd been human, limited, shaped by their own fears and prejudices. They'd loved her once, before illness made her inconvenient. That love, however brief and conditional, had been real. She chose to remember the good parts and release the rest. The walking stick caught her eye, its carved patterns of mountains and pines beautiful in the afternoon light. Colton had made her a second one last month, lighter for days when her energy was low. He'd carved her initials into the handle, CMH, and underneath smaller CR, Clara Mae Hutchins. Colton Raye, not married, not officially. They'd talked about it and decided they didn't need a piece of paper to know what they were to each other. Partners, companions, lovers, family. Words seemed inadequate for what they'd built in this house, on this land. It was bigger than romance, deeper than convenience. It was two souls who'd been told they were worthless finding worth in each other. It was the daily choice to show up, be present, love without conditions. Evening came with its customary beauty. Clara Mae and Colton sat on the porch despite the cold, bundled in quilts, watching the sun paint the mountains in shades of gold and rose and purple. His hand found hers, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. She leaned her head against his shoulder, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. "Happy?" he asked softly. "So happy it scares me sometimes." "Me too." He kissed the top of her head. "But I'm learning that being scared doesn't mean we stop. It means what we have is worth protecting." They sat in silence as darkness crept across the land, stars beginning their nightly display. Clara Mae thought about worth, how for so long she'd believed hers was defined by what she couldn't do, by other people's judgments, by her family's rejection. How wrong she'd been. Worth wasn't about walking or working or being convenient. Worth was inherent, unshakable there from birth. The world had tried to tell her otherwise, but the world was wrong. She'd always had worth. She just needed to find someone who could see it, and more importantly, she needed to see it herself. The ranch gate stood at the end of the drive, its new sign visible even in the fading light. Colton had carved it, Clara Mae had painted it. Raye Ranch, new beginnings. Simple words that held everything they'd become. "Should head in," Colton said eventually. "Getting cold." Clara Mae rose with her walking stick, steady and sure. Colton held the door, and together they entered the warm house, leaving the cold night outside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new joys, new moments of ordinary grace. But tonight they had this, the warmth of home, the comfort of love, the peace of knowing they'd found each other when both had stopped looking. Love. Clara Mae had learned doesn't always arrive when we expect it or in the form we imagine. But when we're ready, when we've done the hard work of learning to value ourselves, it finds us anyway. It slips in through the cracks in our armor, takes root in soil we thought was barren, and grows into something strong enough to weather any storm. She'd been called worthless, broken, a burden. But here, in this house with this man, she'd learned the truth. She was valuable, whole, cherished, not despite her limitations, but as herself, complete and worthy of love exactly as she was, and that made all the difference.